Well, hello everyone and welcome to my library. If you're new here, hello, my name is Chinsia, and if you're not new here and you're one of my lovely regulars, hi, how are you doing? So, as is coming up to Valentine's Day, I thought that it'd be quite appropriate to explore some of the mythological, beings that we associate with love and romance. If you can hear a weird scratching noise, that's my dog eating a treat. This week, I thought we'd focus on the famous Cupid and the myth of Cupid and Psyche more in particular. Now, the Cupid we're discussing today isn't that chubby, doe-eyed little cherub that we're all familiar with, particularly around Valentine's Day, but this handsome winged beast who features most prominently in the Metamorphoses of Apuleius, also more commonly known as the Golden Ass, the only ancient Roman novel in Latin to have survived in its entirety. The Golden Ass was written by the Roman novelist Apuleius in the late 2nd century CE. Now, you may have heard of Cupid or Eros and Psyche before, or you may not actually be familiar with them at all, but I can guarantee that you've heard of a more modern retelling of the myth, La Belle et la Bête, also known as Beauty and the Beast. In fact, this is why I am so excited to share with you the story of Cupid and Psyche, because it's brilliant. The influence of this singular mythology has impacted folklore throughout the centuries, to our contemporary tales such as Beauty and the Beast, to the modern day conceptions of Cupid himself in everyday global marketing for one holiday of the year. But more importantly, folklore, tradition, Grimm's fairy tales, whatever you have it, this myth is effectively the foundation for all of them. We are going to explore the myth of Cupid and Psyche together, and also look at how Cupid became this and then turned into this. There's a little transition here. We won't go into too much depth, we'll keep it nice and light for this week's. But before we actually get into the video, I just need to give some live stream and story update news. So for those of you unfamiliar, I actually run a series of weekly mythology writing prompts over on the Dorian app, which I'll link down below. It's not an affiliate link. However, if you use my link, you actually get some little coins because, hi, I'm one of those creators and yay. Rewards for being a creator over on Dorian. But as I said, every week I set a Mythmakers challenge. And the winner of the Mythmakers challenge who tells the best story gets a $50 gift card every week. And this week is actually Cupid and Psyche. So if you're thinking of joining in the writing competition for the best retelling of Cupid and Psyche, then this video will help you write that story. Secondly, today, my second episode for my Hades and Persephone retelling has just gone live on Dorian as well. So you can read that by following the link down below as well. But I'll actually be live streaming it over on Dorian tomorrow, which is Friday the 4th of February, at 8 PM GMT. Here are all the other time zones in case you're unfamiliar. And a final note also, just for those unfamiliar, I'm kicking off my second channel again soon, so there'll be some more study with me live streams. So if you're interested in study with me videos and that kind of like study-ish kind of organisational talk, videos will be over on there. So make sure you're following that channel, also linked down below. But now all the admin is out of the way, let's get into the story and discuss the myth of Cupid and Psyche. So, the myth goes as follows. There was once a king and a queen who had 3 wonderful daughters, but their youngest, a girl called Psyche, but was known to be the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. People were so stunned by her beauty that they said she looked like Venus on Earth. Venus obviously being the Roman name of the goddess Aphrodite. So beautiful was Psyche that the mortal men actually started to neglect their worship of Venus entirely and instead gave all their offerings and prayers to Psyche. Obviously, enraged and offended, Venus became viciously jealous of Psyche and planned her revenge. So, she ordered her son, Cupid, to go and shoot Psyche with one of his arrows and force her to fall in love with something hideous. Now, we're all familiar with Cupid's arrow. It's the same in ancient myth. It comes from all the way back then. Cupid had an arrow. If he struck you with it, you would fall in love with the first thing you saw. However, in this case, when Cupid saw Psyche, he fell for her beauty as well. And instead, he actually scratched himself with the tip of his arrow and fell in love with Psyche himself. So Cupid kind of completely failed his mission that his mother sent him on, but back on Earth, things weren't much better for Psyche. Her father was eager to get her married, but no one was biting, considering she was the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. No one, not even royalty nor commoner, would approach Psyche. She was so beautiful it was intimidating. So her father consulted the ancient Miletian oracle of Apollo at Idima and asked for a man to please marry his daughter. But the oracle told the king that to take his daughter up to a mountain crag, dress her in all her finery, because she would be married to a serpent-like, winged evil creature who was so feared by even Jupiter himself. Defeated, the king took Psyche, dressed in her funeral attire, to the peak of a rocky crag where she was lifted by the gentle breeze and carried off to actually a flowery meadow. Psyche slept through the process, but when she woke up, she explored this beautiful land and came across a glorious house with golden columns and mosaic floors. As she ventured into the beautiful house and explored the magnificent rooms, she was suddenly surrounded by a clamour of excited voices welcoming her into the house. Voices only. Nothing else. See, it turns out that Psyche couldn't see the waiters or waitresses of the household, but they were there, ready to serve and attend to her every need. The disembodied voices told her that the whole house and all of its wealth belonged to Psyche, because she was now wed to the master of the house. So when Psyche went to bed that night, she was nervous, because she was highly aware that she was now married to a man that she hadn't met or seen, and he was likely to return at night and join them in their marriage bed. As expected, her husband, who we know as Cupid, arrived back in the black of night and did not reveal his name or identity to Psyche. However, he was very graceful to her, warmed her up, flattered her as he would, but he asked her one thing, that she would never ever look at him and just trust that their romance and their marriage would be strengthened by the fact that she knew nothing of him, his name or how he looked. All she knew was his voice. We can imagine Psyche was a little bit like, really, is that how it's going down? But after the first night, she was like, okay, we're fine with this. So they carried on going like that. And soon enough, Psyche fell pregnant. Over time, Psyche became pretty lonely. She missed her family, and the disembodied voices in the palace and her secretive husband made her feel very isolated. So she went to Cupid and asked if her sisters could come and visit her, and Cupid allowed it, permitting the wind that carried her here, the zephyr. But Psyche's sisters were less than pleased when they saw their sister. So little did Psyche know that her sisters were actually stuck in loveless, sexless marriages, and they'd actually been thrilled at the thought of Psyche marrying a snake-like monster in the sky. So you can imagine their faces that when they arrived at the home and saw this glorious home in this gorgeous flowery meadows, and that she was pregnant. Well, to say the least, they were livid. And driven by envy, they feigned their fear for their sister and claimed that the man that she called their husband must actually be a terrifying monster that was going to kill her when she was least expecting. Not only that, but she was going to give birth to a monster that could also potentially kill and eat her. The sisters are so convincing that they convince Psyche to actually take a dagger and a lamp, and when at night, when her husband is sleeping and she knows that he's fast asleep, take out the lamp, light it, look the monster square in the face, and slay the beast. So that night, when Cupid arrives with Psyche, they do their little thing as they always do, and Psyche stays awake until he falls asleep. However, when Psyche followed her sister's orders and lit the oil lamp, she did not reveal a monster, but a handsome, glorious winged god sleeping in her bed beside her. Fascinated by her husband, she examined him thoroughly, and that's when she noticed that there were weapons lying by his side, his Cupid arrows. Psyche ran her fingers over the arrows and accidentally pricked her finger on one of the heads, which caused her to fall even more in love with Cupid than before. In a mad passion, she leapt upon Cupid, and in her excitement spilt the hot oil from the lamp upon his wings, burning him and abruptly waking the god from his slumber. Upon seeing that Psyche had broken her promise to him, Cupid fled the scene, heartbroken, never to return. Devastated at the loss of Cupid and determined to win him back, Psyche went on a mission to win back her husband. But before she did, she actually decided to punish her sisters for their deception and spite. So Psyche went and visited each one of her sisters individually and told them that her husband was no monster but actually the god Cupid. But Psyche tells a wee bit of a lie here. You see, at the end of it, she convinces each one of her sisters independently that Cupid sent her to come and fetch them because they would now replace Psyche as his wife. Psyche tells each sister that they must leap from the cliff's edge to join Cupid in his palace, where Zephyr will carry them away to Cupid. So each sister related runs to the cliffs and leaps off to their deaths. With her sisters punished, Psyche then wanders around looking for her husband until she came across the temple of Ceres. The temple had been left in a terrible state, so Psyche reorganizes the offerings and the garlands inside before praying to the goddess and asking for help. Though appreciative of Psyche's work, Ceres cannot answer her prayer, as she is forbidden to go against Venus's wishes. This happens again with the Juno temple as well, and after Juno fails to answer Psyche's prayer, Psyche realizes that actually she's going to have to appease Venus herself and ask Venus for help. So she goes to Venus, and thrilled to have Psyche at her mercy, Venus revels in Psyche's heartbreak and sets her handmaids, Anxiety and Sorrow, onto Psyche to torture her. Then Venus put Psyche through several trials. The first involved organization and categorization. So Venus threw a mass of mixed wheat, barley, poppy seed, chickpeas, lentils, and beans on the floor and demanded that Psyche separate them before dawn. It was a hopeless task for a human to accomplish in such a short space of time. However, Psyche was aided by a colony of ants who took pity on her circumstances and helped her out. So then the second task for Psyche was to cross the river and fetch the golden wool from the violent sheep that grazed on the other side. Potentially Helios's, it differs. Already devastated and exhausted from her torture and torment, Psyche instead actually decided to try and drown herself in the river, but is stopped by a divinely inspired reed. The reed advises her to stay away from the sheep and instead wait until the sun goes down. Then head to the woods and collect the wool that's hanging on the low-hanging branches in the wood that have naturally pulled off as the sheep have passed through. Psyche completes the task. So Psyche gets sent on a third, and in the third one, she is given a crystal vessel to collect the black water spewed out from the source of the rivers Styx and Cocytus, which are, for those unfamiliar, the rivers of the underworld. But the source of these two rivers is a mountain summit that is so incredibly dangerous, filled with jagged rocks and monstrous serpents, that even the water gurgles out and screams at Psyche to go away or she will die. But before she can actually put herself in any danger, the sharp eyes of the kindly Providence saw her, i.e. Jupiter, and Jupiter sent his mighty eagle down to go and fetch the water for Psyche in the crystal vessel, because he took pity on her. So then the last trial that Venus imposed on Psyche was a quest into the underworld itself. Psyche was ordered by Venus to take a box and obtain in it a dose of beauty of Proserpina, queen of the underworld. And Proserpina is the Roman name for Persephone, which I'm writing a story on. But Psyche is so incredibly done with all this, as you can imagine she is after being put through all this, that she climbs a tower intending to throw herself off it. But then the tower speaks to her and actually advises her to not do it, but to instead travel to Lacedaemon in Greece and seek out a place called Tanaras, and that is where she will find the entrance to the underworld. The tower also advises Psyche on how to navigate the underworld, telling her the following. Once cross the threshold and take that road, you'll reach Pluto's palace by the shortest way. But don't go into the shadows without bearing in each hand a barley cake soaked in honeyed wine, and hold 2 coins in your mouth. When you've completed a good part of your gloomy journey, you'll meet a lame ass carrying wood, and an equally lame driver, who will ask you to hand him some sticks that have fallen from the load. But don't utter a single word and pass them by in silence. Not long afterwards, you'll reach the river of the dead, where Charon, the ferryman, demands an instant toll, and Charon, the tax collector for Pluto, that great deity, does nothing without a fee. A pauper who's dying must find the passage money, and unless there's a coin to hand, no one will allow him to expire. Let the squalid old man have one of the coins you bear, but make sure he takes it out of your mouth with his own hand. And when you're crossing the slow-moving stream, an aged corpse afloat on the surface will raise its rotting head and beg you to lift him onto the boat. Don't be swayed by mistaken pity. Once you are across the river and have gone a little further, some old women weaving at a loom will ask you to lend a hand for a while, but you must not help them either. All these and more are traps laid for you by Venus to make you let go of one of those barley cakes. And don't think losing a barley cake is of little consequence. If you lose either cake, you'll never see daylight again. For you'll arrive at a monstrous dog with triple heads of enormous size, a huge and fearsome creature with thunderous jaws who barks enough to frighten the dead, but in vain. He can do no harm. He keeps constant guard of the threshold of Proserpine's dark halls, defending the insubstantial palace of Dis. One barley cake thrown at a sop will hold him, and you can get by easily and enter Proserpine's presence. She'll receive you courtly and benignly, and try to tempt you to sit down in her comfort and eat a sumptuous meal. But you must squat on the ground, demand common bread and eat that. Then tell her why you are here, take what is set before you, and make your way back, bribing the savage dog with the second barley cake. Give the avaricious ferryman the coin you kept in reserve, cross the river, retrace your steps, and you'll return to the heavenly choir of stars. But above all else, I warn you, be careful. Whatever you do, do not open, and not to look in the jar you've tied to your waist. And don't let your curiosity loose by thinking too much about the hidden treasure. divine beauty. So Psyche follows these towers' instructions precisely to a T. She comes out fine and dandy. And then she's overcome with bloody curiosity. It's like Pandora all over again. She can't resist opening the box because she thinks she can enhance her own beauty and potentially win Cupid back that way. As she unsealed the jar, she saw that there wasn't a drop of beauty inside at all, but a deathly Stygian sleep that overcame her. So during all this time, Cupid's actually been at home. He's been nursing his poorly wing that got burned by the oil spill. He hasn't been able to fly since. But now he was recovered, he was actually really longing for his wife. He regretted leaving her. So Cupid leaves the palace and flies looking for Psyche, whom he finds consumed by a Stygian sleep. So he has the power, thankfully, to wipe the sleep from her eyes and restores it back to the jar, and he kind of gently scolds her, telling her she's a bit too silly for her own good, but then tells her to go to his mother, finish the task, give her the jar, whilst he flies to Jupiter to ask for support against his mother. Cupid gets Jupiter's blessing, and Mercury orders a meeting of the gods where Jupiter informs them all that he's going to legitimize the marriage between Cupid and Psyche. Mercury brings Psyche up through the heavens and hands her a cup of ambrosia to drink that will make her immortal. Once immortal, Jupiter legitimizes the marriage, and Cupid and Psyche live on forever, happily ever after, and then they have a little daughter, Woloptos, or Hedone in Greek, which means pleasure. There are countless motifs throughout the myth of Cupid and Psyche that can be found across many popular fairy tales, from Beauty and the Beast to The Little Mermaid, Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin, etc. So, through Venus itself, Venus we can see the trope of the evil stepmother who's jealous of another one's beauty, potentially a stepdaughter or a daughter, etc. The disembodied voices in Cupid's palace are very much like the enchanted furniture in Beast's palace in Beauty and the Beast. The jealous sisters are punished for their vindictiveness, much like in Cinderella. And the little ants and the reed, etc. are much like the animals we see in fairy tales that help the heroine in their time of need. This is a really deep topic we can get into, so if you want to see more videos on how myths actually influence fairy tales and interconnect, please leave requests down below. I'd be more than happy to explore them in a little video essay. However, whilst we leave that point, because we can go on forever, you're probably wondering how Cupid went from hunky heartthrob to chubby cherub. Just hearing this myth, you can tell that Cupid isn't someone that you would mess with. Cupid wasn't some kind of sweet, innocent being who would make people fall in love with each other just for the sake of it. His power actually lay in his ability to make the wrong people fall in love with each other. See, this power was highlighted in Hippolytus, a 5th century BCE play by Euripides, in which the chorus chant, Eros, god of love, distilling liquid desire down upon the eyes, bringing sweet pleasure to the souls of those against whom we make war. Never to me may you show yourself to my heart, nor ever come but in due measure and harmony. People were intimidated by Cupid, but only up until around the 4th BCE, and that's when the social status of Athenian women started dropping drastically. So a man such as Cupid, who was controlled by a woman, and not just any woman, his mother, started to get looked down upon. Aphrodite/Venus's control over her son, Cupid/Eros, infantilized Eros, according to the ancient Athenians. And thus what was propagated was an infantilized conception of Eros or Cupid. But where we get most of our Cupid imagery is actually from the Romans, who forwarded this cherubic representation of Cupid, because they actually copied a lot of what the Greeks were doing. They admired them. They saw the Greeks as the epitome of cultural sophistication. So if the Greeks started infantilizing Eros, the Romans were going to follow suit and start infantilizing Cupid. What also helped prompt Cupid become this little angelic cherub? Well, let's ask a history question. We're looking at 4 CE. What was quite new in 4 CE? You've got it, Christianity. In the Christian era, Cupids became angelic beings, symbolizing divine benevolence and compassion. And in the 4th century CE in particular, European artists began to depict angels with wings. So it's all merging together. Now don't get it twisted, angels were a concept long before Christianity. They were part of the ancient Zoroastrian and ancient Judaic cultures. But, just taking this concept, you can see that this blending of the social infantilization of Cupid with the rise of Christian angelic artwork in the Roman Empire resulted in a cherubic depiction of Cupid that we're more familiar with today, especially for the Christian holiday, Valentine's Day. This was just a wee bit of a briefer video than usual, but I hope you still enjoyed it. I just thought it'd be a nice way to introduce the myth to people and also give a little bit of wee context. But if there was anything in this video you'd like me to expand on further and like explore another video, please let me know. I'd be so interested to see what people actually wanted to hear more of from this video. And thank you again for everyone who has watched. Remember, I'm live streaming on Dorian on Friday at 8 p.m. GMT or your time zone. Also, I'll be live streaming over on the weekend over on my second channel for just, studying with me videos. Please make sure you're subscribed over there, and I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.